I never thought a simple summer night would turn into one of the most unforgettable and terrifying moments in my life. But there I was, standing on the edge of a dark lake, gripping a towel and trying to stay calm while my best friend Matt was still swimming out past the farthest buoy, completely oblivious to the creeping cold and the growing panic in my chest. So yeah, let me back up a bit, because this wasn't how I expected the night to go at all. Matt and I have been friends since college, and for years we've had this unspoken competition of who's braver or crazier, depending on how you look at it. That night, after a few beers at his place, he casually suggested we go skinny dipping in the lake behind his house. I laughed it off at first. Skinny dipping was something I thought only happened in movies or, way younger days. But Matt was so insistent, with that mischievous grin and those eyes that always seemed to dare me to do something stupid. I couldn't say no. The lake itself is tucked away in this quiet part of town, surrounded by trees that block out most of the moonlight. It's the kind of place that feels a little magical and a little creepy at the same time, especially once the sun goes down. We slipped out the back door and made the short walk down the worn trail, laughing and fumbling with our clothes in the dark. The cold hit me as soon as I stepped into the water. Not freezing, but definitely shocking. Matt just dove right in, with zero hesitation, and I followed, the nerves bubbling up in my stomach, mixing with the thrill. We swam out past the shallow part, the water cool and surprisingly clear. The stars were scattered overhead, and for a minute, everything felt perfect, light, easy, like we were kids again with no worries. Matt's laugh echoed across the lake, and I found myself grinning just as wide, feeling something flicker between us that I hadn't really acknowledged before. There was a tension there, subtle but electric. Then, out of nowhere, Matt swam farther from shore, past me even, toward the deeper part where the water swallowed the moonlight whole. I called out to him, teasing, but he waved me off and kept going. At first, I thought he was just being his usual daredevil self, but as the minutes stretched on, I started to get that sinking feeling. He was too far out. The water was colder than I expected, and he wasn't coming back. I called again, louder this time. "Matt, dude, you okay?" No answer. Panic kicked in. I wanted to swim after him, but my legs felt like jelly, and the cold was starting to bite through my skin. I wrapped the towel tighter around me, trying to convince myself he was fine, probably just messing with me. But the sun was fully gone now, and the shadows in the water looked like they were reaching for him. That's where I'm at, standing on the shore, heart pounding, hoping my reckless friend would come back before something worse happened. And honestly, I wasn't sure what scared me more. The idea of losing him, or the fact that, in that moment, I realized I might have deeper feelings for him than I ever admitted. But right now, the only thing that mattered was getting him out of the water. Because he'd stayed in too long. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. My eyes were straining to catch even the faintest movement out there. The water's surface rippled gently, but Matt wasn't coming closer. It was like he'd disappeared into some dark pocket of the lake that swallowed sound and light. I called his name again, voice cracking under the weight of the cold air and my rising panic. "Matt, seriously, you okay?" No answer. Just silence, except for the occasional splash of water hitting the shore. I realized I was shivering, not just from the cold, but from fear, pure and simple. I hated feeling helpless, especially with Matt. We've been through a lot together, and I always thought I could count on him to have my back. Now, here I was, watching him drift away, and I had no idea what to do. I debated jumping back in after him, but something was holding me back. The farther he went, the darker the water looked, and I felt like I was staring into a void. What if I got in trouble too? What if we both ended up worse off? My mind was racing through every worst-case scenario, and it wasn't helping. Suddenly, a shout broke my panic-fueled spiral. "Hey, are you guys okay out there?" I turned toward the tree line and saw a faint beam of light bobbing through the bushes. Someone was coming down the path. "Yeah, we're fine," I yelled, trying to sound less desperate than I felt. The figure got closer. It was an older guy, probably a neighbor. He was holding a flashlight and looking at me with concern. "You shouldn't be out this late by the lake. It's dangerous," he said, eyes flicking toward the water. "Is that your friend?" Yeah, I said, nodding toward the spot where Matt had last been. He went swimming. I think he stayed in too long. He's still out there somewhere. The neighbor's face tightened. I'll get some help, he said, pulling out his phone. I felt a mix of relief and guilt wash over me. Relief because someone else was coming, guilt because I hadn't acted sooner or done more. I watched him hurry off, the flashlight beam disappearing into the bushes. Now, I was left alone again, the towel slipping from my cold fingers, my heart hammering. I paced the shoreline, eyes locked on the water, willing Matt to come back. And then I heard it. A splash. Closer this time. Matt? I called, running toward the sound. He emerged from behind a cluster of reeds, coughing, water streaming off his hair and face. He looked pale, lips tinged blue, but alive. Dude, I said, grabbing his arm to steady him. What the hell? You scared me. Matt gave me a weak smile. Sorry. I just wanted to see how far I could go. I didn't think about how cold it was. I shook my head, half laughing, half scolding him. You're an idiot. He laughed too, but his eyes were glassy and he was trembling hard. Come on, I said, wrapping the towel around both of us. Let's get you warmed up. We trudged back toward the house, Matt leaning on me more than I expected. Once inside, I grabbed a blanket and started a fire in the small wood stove. As the room warmed, I watched him curl up on the couch, exhausted. Thanks for coming after me, Matt said quietly. No way, I replied. You're not just some friend. I'm not letting you drown. He looked at me then, something unspoken passing between us. For a moment, the playful bravado was gone, replaced by something raw and real. I've been wanting to tell you something, he said, voice low. I felt my chest tighten. Yeah? He nodded, biting his lip. I think I like you, more than a friend. I swallowed hard, the confession hanging in the air between us. The fear, the adrenaline, the cold. All of it faded into something warmer, softer. I think I like you too, I admitted. Matt smiled, relief spreading across his face. For the first time all night, I felt safe. Not because the danger was gone, but because whatever was between us suddenly made everything else make sense. We sat there, side by side, wrapped in blankets and quiet, the night's chaos settling into something new, something I never expected but couldn't imagine not having. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. We stayed like that for a while, the fire crackling softly and casting flickering shadows across the room. Matt was still shivering a bit, but the warmth was doing its job. I could feel the tension between us, the kind that sneaks up when you finally admit something you've both been scared to say. It wasn't like we jumped right into some grand romantic confession or anything, more like a quiet acknowledgement that things were different now. So I said, breaking the silence, "You've been wanting to tell me that since when?" He shrugged, rubbing his arms as if to chase away the last bits of cold. Honestly? Probably since last summer. I was just too chicken to say it, I chuckled. Last summer? Damn, I'm slow. I always thought you were just messing with me because I'm terrible at swimming. Maybe I was. But mostly, I just didn't know how you'd react. I mean, we're friends, and I didn't want to mess that up. I looked at him, really looked at him, and suddenly, all the little moments we'd shared over the years flashed through my mind. The way he'd brush his hand against mine when we thought no one was looking. The way his laughter always felt like it was meant just for me. The way I'd catch myself staring when I thought he wasn't paying attention. It made sense now, like pieces clicking into place. Matt, I said, voice a little softer than usual, nothing about this messes up us. If anything, it makes it better. He smiled, that genuine, relieved smile that made my heart do an annoying little flip. Good, because I want to try. I want to see where this goes. I nodded, feeling more certain than I had in a long time. Me too. The rest of the night slipped by in a way that only happens when you're with someone who finally feels like home. We talked about everything and nothing, shared stories we'd never told anyone else, and laughed until the fire burned low. The awkwardness faded, replaced by this quiet comfort. Morning came too soon, sunlight streaming through the windows and highlighting the tired, happy faces we both wore. Matt was still wrapped in the blanket, looking a little more himself now, though the night had clearly taken its toll. "You hungry?" I asked, heading to the kitchen to grab some coffee. He nodded, and I made 2 cups, the familiar routine grounding me. We sat at the small table, sipping and staring out at the lake, now peaceful and bright in the morning sun. "Do you think we're crazy?" Matt asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. I laughed. "Probably. But it's the good kind of crazy. The kind that makes life interesting." He smiled again, and I felt that quiet joy settle in my chest. We'd been through a lot that night. The cold, the fear, the near panic. But it all led us here, to this new chapter neither of us knew we were ready for, but clearly needed. A few days later, we started to figure out what us really meant. It wasn't some grand, sweeping romance like in the movies. It was small moments, texting each other bad jokes, stealing glances when we thought the other wasn't looking, and yes, more late-night swims, though this time with plenty of towels and way less panic. One evening, a week after that night, we found ourselves back at the lake. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. We sat on the dock, feet dangling above the water, the world quiet except for the gentle lapping of the lake. "I've been thinking," Matt said, tossing a small pebble into the water. Oh, I teased. "Should I be worried?" He grinned. "Maybe a little. I want to be honest with you about everything. I don't want to hide how I feel or pretend it's nothing." I reached over, squeezing his hand. "Me neither." There was a pause, the kind full of possibility. "You're kind of amazing," I blurted, the words coming out before I could stop them. Matt's cheeks flushed, and he looked away, but there was a spark in his eyes. "You're not so bad yourself?" he replied. We laughed, the easy kind that makes your stomach hurt. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized that night by the lake wasn't just some reckless adventure. It was the start of something real. Looking back, it's funny how a night that nearly ended in disaster became the moment everything changed. Matt staying in the water too long wasn't just a scare, it was a wake-up call. For both of us. Sometimes, you don't realize what you want until you almost lose it. And sometimes, the person you need most is the one who's been right there all along, daring you to take a chance. So yeah, that night was terrifying. But it was also the best thing that ever happened to me. And I've never been more grateful for a stupid, cold lake and a friend who stayed in too long. After that evening on the dock, things between Matt and me settled into a new rhythm, one that felt both exciting and terrifying in the best way possible. I won't lie, it was awkward at first. We were navigating this whole more than friends thing without a map, and I kept catching myself wondering if I was reading too much into the way he looked at me or the way his hand just happened to brush mine when we passed stuff across the table. But then again, those little things were what made it feel real, like the time we went out to grab some late-night tacos and ended up sitting on the curb, sharing a single blanket because it was chilly. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture or anything, just 2 guys who knew there was something there but weren't quite ready to put a label on it. Matt broke the silence then, chewing on a tortilla chip and looking at me with that shy smile I'd come to recognize. "You ever think about how weird this is? Us?" I laughed. "Every day. But it's good weird, right?" "Definitely good weird." That's when I realized that maybe the scariest part wasn't admitting feelings or changing the dynamic of our friendship. It was just letting ourselves be vulnerable. And honestly, I was glad we were figuring it out together. A few weeks later, Matt invited me over for dinner. He's a pretty decent cook, though I'm convinced half the time he's just Googling recipes while I'm in the other room. That night felt different from the start. More intentional, like we both knew this was something we wanted to explore beyond late-night swims and stolen moments. We ate pasta, drank cheap red wine, and talked about everything from the dumb stuff that happened at work to what we wanted out of life. Somewhere between the second glass and dessert, the conversation took a turn. "So," Matt said, swirling his glass, "where do you see us? Like, in a month? 6 months? A year?" I paused, not because I didn't have answers, but because it was the first time I'd put it into words. "Honestly, I want to see where this goes. I don't want to rush it, but I want it to be real. Not just some summer fling or what-if scenario." He nodded slowly. "Me too. I guess I'm just scared of messing things up." "Yeah, me too." I reached across the table and took his hand. "But I think it's worth taking the risk." He smiled, and for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page, ready to actually be something more than friends who happened to like each other. Things weren't perfect. We had our awkward moments, like the time I accidentally called him buddy during a date, or when Matt got jealous over a guy who wasn't even a threat. But every time something went sideways, we talked it through. We were learning to trust each other in a way that felt new, but deeply right. One night, a couple of months after that dinner, we found ourselves back at the lake, the place where everything started. It was late, and the water was warm from the summer heat, inviting. Matt grinned that mischievous grin again and said, "Race you to the buoy?" I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling. "You're on." We dove in, the cool water shocking at first, but then soothing. As we swam, I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline mixed with comfort. Something about being in the water with him made everything else fade away. When we reached the buoy, Matt was already treading water, waiting for me with that teasing smirk. "Not bad," he said, splashing me playfully. I laughed, catching my breath. "You cheat somehow." "Nah, just faster." We floated there for a minute, the stars reflected on the rippling surface. "Hey," Matt said, voice quieter now. "Yeah?" He looked at me, really looked, like he was trying to memorize every detail. "I'm glad we did this. The whole crazy night, the talks, all of it. I never thought I'd find this. Us." "Me neither," I admitted. There was a pause, and then Matt reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from my forehead. My heart caught in that moment, the simple touch saying more than words ever could. "I like you," he whispered. "I like you too," I said, leaning in. Our lips met, tentative at first, then deeper, like we were both catching up on years of unspoken feelings. The water around us was cold, but I didn't care. In that moment, nothing else existed but us. When we finally pulled apart, both of us laughing softly, Matt grinned and said, "So, skinny dipping again?" I shook my head, still catching my breath. "Maybe next time, but maybe with some warm clothes nearby." He nodded, the playful spark still in his eyes. Deal. As we swam back toward shore, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just a fling or a late-night adventure anymore. This was real, messy and awkward and perfect all at once. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see where it went from here. After that night at the lake, things between Matt and me started to settle into this weird but comfortable in-between space. We weren't shouting from rooftops or plastering our relationship all over social media, but the way we looked at each other, the little touches, the inside jokes, it all felt like a promise, even if we hadn't said the words yet. The days blurred into each other, with the usual mix of work, occasional hangouts, and text messages that sometimes stretched into the early morning hours. I caught myself smiling at my phone more often than I expected, replaying little conversations in my head. It was the kind of feeling that sneaks up on you, where suddenly you realize the person on the other end means more than just a friend. One Friday evening, Matt invited me over after work. When I got there, the place smelled like garlic and something spicy simmering on the stove. He was wearing one of his old band tees and those worn-in jeans that somehow made him look effortlessly cool. He had this goofy grin on his face that made my heart thump just a little faster. "Wanted to surprise you?" he said, sliding a glass of red wine across the counter. I raised an eyebrow. "Wine and dinner? Setting the bar high tonight, huh?" "Only the best for you," he teased, then winked. "Well, the best I can muster." We sat down at his small kitchen table, plates steaming in front of us. The conversation flowed easily. Work gripes, terrible reality shows, weekend plans, but beneath it all, there was this current of something unspoken. I wanted to say something, make it official, but the words felt stuck. After dinner, we moved to the couch with our wine, the room dimly lit by a lamp in the corner. Matt pulled his knees up and looked at me, serious for a moment. "Hey, I've been thinking." I frowned a little. "That sounds dangerous." He laughed softly and took a sip of his wine. "I guess what I mean is, I want us to be more than just whatever this is. Like, I don't want to keep pretending we're just friends when we both know it's not true." I nodded, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing." "Good," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Because I don't want to mess this up, but I also don't want to hide from it." I reached over and took his hand, fingers intertwining naturally. "Neither do I." It was a small moment, but it felt like a turning point. The weight of uncertainty lifted slightly, replaced by a fragile kind of hope. The next few weeks were, well, honestly, kind of messy. We both stumbled through new territory. First dates that felt more like old friends hanging out, awkward conversations about boundaries and expectations, and the occasional misstep when old habits crept back in. But through it all, there was this growing sense of trust, like we were building something that wasn't just fun or convenient, but real. One Sunday afternoon, we decided to revisit the lake. It had become kind of a tradition, the place where we went to escape the noise of life and just be ourselves. The sun was warm on my skin, and the air smelled like pine and fresh water. We walked down the familiar trail, kicking up leaves and laughing at some dumb joke Matt made. When we got to the water, Matt surprised me. "Race you to the buoy again?" I grinned. "You know I'm not going to say no to that." We stripped down and dove in, the water cool and refreshing. This time, the swim felt different. Lighter, like the pressure of the past months had washed away with the waves. When we reached the buoy, Matt grabbed my arm and pulled me close, water dripping from his hair and eyelashes. "You know," he said, voice low, "I've never felt this way before." "It's scary, but good scary," I smiled, heart pounding. "Yeah, me too." He leaned in and our lips met. Not the hesitant kiss from before, but something deeper, more confident. We pulled apart, laughing breathlessly, the water swirling around us like it had witnessed everything. Later, as we lay on the dock wrapped in towels, Matt traced lazy circles on my arm. "Do you think we're crazy for doing this?" I looked at him, the fading daylight catching the gold in his eyes. "Crazy or not, I wouldn't trade it for anything." He smiled, resting his head on my shoulder. "Me neither." That night, as I walked back to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe this wild, unexpected thing between us could last. That the fear and uncertainty were just parts of the journey. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to stop running from what I wanted most. So yeah, skinny dipping led to a lot more than I ever imagined. It brought me closer to Matt, closer to myself, and to the possibility of something real. And honestly, I can't wait to see where it goes next. A few days after that swim at the lake, I found myself lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment we'd shared over the past few months. It's strange how something as simple as a swim could lead to so much fear, excitement, and now this steady, comforting feeling I hadn't expected. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I wanted Matt in it. That morning, I texted him a simple message. "Coffee later?" He replied almost immediately. "You read my mind." We met at the little cafe near my apartment, the one with the terrible lighting and the best espresso. When I saw him walk in, sunlight catching the strands of his hair, my heart did that annoying flutter again. We grabbed a corner table and ordered our drinks. Matt looked at me with that familiar grin and said, "So, what's on your mind this morning?" "Honestly, just trying to figure out how I got so lucky," I admitted, shaking my head. He laughed, eyes crinkling. "Are you hitting me with the charm offensive now?" "Maybe," I said with a smirk. "But seriously, I've been thinking a lot about us, about how this all started with a stupid idea to swim undressed in a cold lake." Matt nodded, swirling his coffee. "Yeah, who knew skinny dipping could be so life-changing?" We fell into that comfortable silence for a moment, the kind that means you don't have to fill every second with words. Then Matt looked up, his expression shifting. I've been meaning to ask you something. Shoot. Are you happy? Like, really happy with where we're at? I paused because it was a good question, and the answer wasn't as simple as I wanted it to be. Honestly, I am, but I guess I'm still figuring out what happy really looks like. I shrugged. I want this to work. I want us to be more than just some summer thing or a fling. But sometimes I worry if I'm ready for all that comes with it. Matt nodded slowly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Yeah, I get that. I'm scared too. But I think that's part of it, right? Taking a chance, not knowing exactly how it'll go, but choosing to try anyway. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. Exactly. That afternoon, we decided to take a walk through the neighborhood, the city buzzing around us but somehow feeling like our own little bubble. We talked about everything. Our families, the future, the awkward moments we'd had so far. It felt like we were peeling back layers, getting closer in ways that went beyond the physical. At one point, Matt stopped and pulled me close, resting his forehead against mine. He whispered, I'm glad you didn't say no that night, even when I was being an idiot swimming out too far. I smiled, brushing my hand through his hair. Me too. It's funny how a stupid dare turned into something real. He grinned. Yeah, real and terrifying. We laughed, and for a moment, everything else faded away. Over the next few weeks, things continued to evolve. We faced the usual hurdles: jealousy, insecurities, and the occasional miscommunication, but we tackled them head on. I was learning how to trust not just Matt but myself, to open up and be vulnerable in ways I never thought I could. One evening, Matt invited me over to his place for dinner again. This time, he was nervous, fidgeting as he cooked. When we sat down, he looked at me seriously. I've been thinking about what you said, the part about wanting this to be more than a fling. I nodded, encouraging him to continue. Well, I want that too. I want to be with you, not just now, but in the long run. I want us to be official. My heart skipped a beat. You mean like a real relationship? He smiled, a little shy but determined. Yeah, I know we've been taking it slow, but I want to stop pretending and just be us. All in, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Matt, I want that too. More than anything, we leaned across the table and kissed, the promise of something new and uncertain but full of hope. That night, as I walked home, I thought back to that first night skinny dipping, the fear, the cold, the way I realized how much Matt meant to me. It was crazy how life could twist and turn, how a reckless moment could lead to something so deeply meaningful. I smiled to myself, knowing that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Because sometimes you just have to take the plunge, even if it means staying in the water a little longer than you should. The day we finally made things official, it wasn't marked by some grand gesture or perfect moment. It was quiet, simple, just the two of us sitting on Matt's porch steps, the sun dipping low and casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. I remember feeling the weight of everything we'd been through, the awkwardness, the fears, the surprises, and realizing how much it all had shaped us. Matt reached over and took my hand, his fingers fitting perfectly with mine. So, does this mean we're boyfriend official now? I laughed softly, squeezing his hand. Yeah, I think it does. He grinned, that same mischievous sparkle in his eyes that first dared me to go skinny dipping all those months ago. Only now, it felt different. Calm, steady, like we were both exactly where we were supposed to be. We sat there for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to indigo, the sounds of the neighborhood winding down around us. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. There were no fireworks or big speeches, just two people who had taken a chance on each other. Messy and imperfect, but real. Looking back, it amazes me how a night that started with cold water and fear led to a feeling of belonging and a kind of happiness I hadn't known I was capable of. Matt taught me what it meant to trust, to be vulnerable, and to embrace the unknown, even when it's scary. Sometimes the best moments in life come from the most unexpected places. For us, that place was a dark lake at midnight, a reckless swim, and a friendship that turned into something much deeper. As we sat there, hands entwined, I felt a quiet gratitude, not just for Matt, but for the messy, beautiful journey that brought us here. And honestly, I wouldn't change a single thing.